This RealAg Radio podcast episode is brought to you by Focus Herbicide from FMC. When tank mixed with glyphosate, Focus Herbicide provides a complete solution. Broadleaf burn-off and extended control on key grassy and broadleaf weeds like wild oats, bromes, and kochia in lentils, wheat, and more. See your local retailer or visit ag.fmc.com/ca today.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. And welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147 is Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Friday edition of the show. Thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. Greatly appreciate you being here with us today. Also, a big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast. Well, there's a lot happening in the world of agriculture in Canada, the U.S., and beyond. We're going to try to tackle, we won't be able to get to all of it. I promise you that. Tariffs, of course. We're also going to talk about the decision by Federal Ag Minister Lawrence MacAulay to not run again in the next Canadian federal election. That's a 35-year career that is going to come to an end in Canadian politics. It's a long time, 1988 to be exact. That's the Calgary Olympics. Think about how old you were during the Calgary Olympics. That's how long Lawrence MacAulay's been doing this gig. We're also going to talk, of course, about some of the travels from this week. I was at Commodity Classic, was at Crops Convention. I actually saw one of our panelists, Tyler McCann from CAPI, in Edmonton. Also, other panelists will be Kelvin Heppner and Lyndsey Smith. Now, if you have any feedback on today's show, we'd love to hear from you. You can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call the RealAg listener line, 855-776-6147, or find Real Agriculture really in all the applications across social media. I really do appreciate the interaction with you on social, through email, through text, DMs, things like that, as well as some of the audience that I saw in person at Commodity Classic this week, as well as at Crops Convention. Let's take a break. When we get back, we're going to get to our panel right after this.
I'm Lyndsey Smith. Joining me now is Chris Kennard for Farmer's Edge.
Our focus is all about supporting agri-retailers and those that serve farmers directly. We aim to be an enabler both from the tech perspective and the lab perspective. And really the one big change there is the expansion of our soil lab services, really opening the door to agri-retailers, independent agronomists, making it easier for them to access fast, reliable soil testing. The labs work extremely efficient. What we feel sets us apart is also our integrations. We've built API connections with existing software that retailers and independent agronomy companies use to bring the results easier back into their own systems. We want to help retailers grow their business, and in today's market, turnaround times are extremely important. So we want to make sure that it's top of mind when thinking about Farmer's Edge as a lab. Our website is www.farmersedgelabs.com. There is a link to both the Canadian site and then the US site.
Through a growing storm of kochia, cleavers, chickweed, and more, there's a clear path. Introducing Oxbow, a versatile cereal broadleaf herbicide that gets the job done. Powered by Duplisan technology, Oxbow is your workhorse on resistant kochia and other tough weeds. With flexibility in timing, rates, and recropping options, your path is clear. Find your way on the path of least resistance at newfarm.ca/Oxbow.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Oh, we have lots to discuss on today's show. I'm looking forward to it. Hey, Vetterstad is partnering with Canadian farmers for outstanding emergence. Their lineup of tillage, seeding, and planting equipment offers solutions for all soil types, field conditions, and tillage practices. And all of this helps you maximize yield. To learn more and find your local dealer, just visit Vetterstad.com. Let's bring in the panel. Up first, Lyndsey Smith, coming out of Ottawa, Ontario, the nation's capital. Lyndsey, how are you doing?
Fine, I guess. That's what I'm going with.
That was a very sinister, evil entry by you.
Is anybody okay right now? I mean, honestly. Yeah.
It's Friday. I'm feeling
so
good.
yeah.
I get to speak to a whole bunch of Syngenta growers in London, Ontario, where I'm sitting here right now in a hotel room. I'm good.
Well, okay, so I'll say this. Here's the silver lining. It looks like we'll have maple syrup weather next week. And me and Pete don't agree on everything, but we agree that maple syrup season is fantastic.
Yeah, if you thought
so that's what I'm looking forward to.
If you thought Elf liked maple syrup, I want to introduce you to my friend Peter Johnson.
Peter Johnson, who is in Costa Rica this week, the smart guy. Anyway.
Get away from all this news. That was smart. That was really smart. Very smart. Also joining us is Kelvin Heppner, coming out of Altona, Manitoba. Kelvin, how are you?
I'm doing all right here. Can't complain personally. Certainly the news cycle this week has been filled with whiplash. I think we all have sore necks or something. I'm not sure. I need to go see a chiropractor, I guess.
Whiplash. Yep. Were you on the road this week or were you at home?
Can't remember. I've been at home. I've been at home trying to catch up or stay caught up on farm stuff and on the news cycle and everything tariff related. So yeah, it's been a busy week. Not traveling.
Also joining us is Tyler McCann. He's managing director at CAPI, who I also saw this week at Crop Convention in Edmonton. So in the flesh, Tyler.
And it was great to see you. And I'm doing really good because I got to spend yesterday in Camrose talking to some crop management network growers. And Shaun, I think I'd put those crop management network growers up against those Syngenta growers you're going to see any day. And I think we'd come out ahead.
It's on, you guys.
I had supper on commodity. Like it was Commodity Classic this week, which I'm having a hard time reconciling where we are in the days here. But I had supper with some of the management and some of the agronomists from Crop Management Network in Denver at Commodity Classic. That was on Monday night. So we had a really nice visit. Along with some of the team from ICI out of Southern Alberta as well. So we had a good time with some of the team there at Helena going over for supper and had a really nice Italian meal, which one of my favorites. So it was great. I guess let's start off with some of those travels. It's hard to believe that Sunday was the day that we were at Commodity Classic, and I got a chance to ask Brooke Rollins the question in the media room, which was great. And I think I'm going to take responsibility for her dropping the tariff, or President Trump dropping the tariff on potash from 25 to 10, because I pushed her on it, and then she went directly to President Trump and said, "Hey, this Canadian reporter was just asking me about this, and I think we should change this," and he did. So at least that's my version of the story. In a world where everybody has their own alternative facts. Those are mine.
I don't think, Shaun, that there are any alternative facts to the reality that you have probably spoken more words to Brooke Rollins than any other Canadian, which is an issue.
It is an issue.
That's probably true at this point, at least publicly anyway, and been able to ask questions.
Yeah, I think there's a few that have behind the scenes, but we definitely know this. Lawrence MacAulay is not one of them. But no. But Kelvin, before I let you go here, what I did hear this week at Crops Convention, I was corrected by during our panel that no foreign diplomat in any ag portfolio has talked to Brooke Rollins. So Lawrence MacAulay is not alone here on an isolated island. So, Kelvin, go ahead.
I was going to say it might be Shaun. It might also be. I'm assuming some of our fertilizer industry CEOs have probably reached out behind the scenes as well when it comes to the potash situation. But yeah, certainly government officials, diplomatic relations, certainly in Canada being iced out, like Shaun just said, along with other countries as well. And it's sure looks like an intentional approach by the Trump administration and secretaries around him.
What's interesting to me this week, I sort of I look at the February results for the Purdue CME Ag Barometer, okay, and they're like a 157. Like they're quite high. Like farmers are optimistic about the future, and if I take that knowledge and I apply that to some of the conversations I had with the supply chain, there is a big gap. There is a difference here in terms of how the industry feels about what the future could be financially versus what farmers are feeling in that data from Purdue. Also, anecdotally, having conversations with them as well. It's kind of interesting to try to reconcile that, Lyndsey. It's clearly the politics of the day are leading to some of that optimism.
Absolutely. And I think also, as we've been talking about or trying to navigate what is wild to me to think has only been the last 7 days since we last spoke like this, is trying to navigate the where the rubber hits the road, right? Realistically, for farmers, they're one step removed from that. And that, I think, is a big part of it, because I know most farmers, in this past week would have been navigating some disruption, but nothing nearly like the industries who are daily moving things across the border are going to be dealing with, or trying to order, or trying to put in position, or trying to whatever. So, I can understand. And again, when was that, when was the barometer, when was that survey done?
From February, yeah.
That's right. It's from February, not, maybe most recent, which we've had just an incredible amount of disruption in the past 2 weeks. So, and it's the American version. So, when you look at the Canadian numbers,
they're a lot less.
They're a lot less, and for good reason. But I think that they're realistically, as Kelvin said, I think last week, of waiting for the chickens to come home to roost, the actual impacts hit different industries, different parts of the supply chain at different times, and definitely our industries are likely feeling this more immediately. But SHIT rolls downhill. I'm just saying. We'll feel it eventually.
Kelvin, and we have seen for a while that, month to month, quarter to quarter, you compare our Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index versus the U.S. CME Purdue Ag Barometer. Canadian farmers have been more pessimistic about their current farm financial performance and the future. So this is not, this gap is not new. It has closed at times, but it's kind of been this way. But I will say this, in talking to audiences in the past 3 weeks, I think farmers in Canada are more optimistic about things right now than they were, say, back in January, whether you regarded the tariffs or not. I just, in talking to them, they feel more positive. I don't know. What's your read, Kelvin?
Maybe there's been a bit of a rebound in some of the commodity markets prior to the tariffs. We're still trying to figure out where the markets are headed in terms of cash bids and stuff with the tariffs right now. Some of that is still playing out right now as the day-to-day news changes, what faces a tariff, what doesn't, that kind of thing. But I could see there probably has been a little bit of a bounce tied in with the commodity prices. Overall, I think our politics are a big reason for that. Of course, in the U.S., farmers tend to vote for President Trump and the Republicans, and so that probably led to some optimism. And here in Canada, we've had 9 years of the Trudeau government, and farmers ready for a change there. And so that is part of the overall sentiment. I think that flavors it heavily. I do wonder, though, whether we have seen the needle move a little bit in terms of the support for Trump from American farmers this week. And I know many are listening and they can share their feedback with us. But I think there's a lot of people scratching their heads like, hang on, we supported this guy. We were loyal to him. And now he's implementing these things that are going to make our costs go up this much. And this is all backwards. When this isn't, he keeps changing his tune. That's not good business practices. I think there's a list of things that have added up here over the last couple of weeks that have moved the needle more than maybe anything in the past in terms of testing farmers' loyalty here. And certainly there is still a lot of loyalty, but I think it has started to move the needle a little bit.
If I look, though, in like Bloomberg and the Globe, Wall Street Journal, some of the farmers they've been quoting in some of those stories, also a member of the North Dakota Farmers Union, or I'm not sure it's moved as much as it has.
The comment sections are a cesspool on social media, but the tide is turning.
And there's people questioning, no doubt.
And even I would say locally, like here in Western Canada, I would say traditionally, if you polled farmers, there would be some respect or admiration of President Trump and favor of his overall policies or direction, the things that he supposedly stands for. I've heard a lot of farmers around here that are quite upset, and they've lost that loyalty here the last week or two because he actually went ahead with implementing these tariffs.
Yeah, and the up and down and the seesawing is definitely
farmers that actively participated in the trucker convoy, calling him an orange idiot. That tide has turned here this last couple of weeks.
And at the same time, though, that's on the Canadian side of the border. Where it really counts is, how does the American voting farmer, where do they lead? And that's really the question. What I will say is one piece of, and it's probably like a subtle thing that most people don't notice. We did see this week, like the American Soybean Association meeting with the GFO at Commodity Classic and publishing pictures. That seems like a small thing, but I think that's a big move and a bit of a, in support of trade amongst, in this case, Canada and the U.S. So interesting stuff indeed. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about the tariffs because there's some confusion, and I'm one of them. Is there tariffs? Is there not tariffs? Wait a minute. There's things that aren't USMCA compliant. I really don't understand. But before we do that, maximize productivity and profitability with an innovative, all-in-one approach to farming, combining accounting, business planning, agronomic field planning, and advanced technology. MMP Ag Intellect delivers personalized solutions that empower you to make confident, data-driven decisions. You can visit mmp.ca to learn more. We'll be right back on RealAg Radio right after this.
FP Genetics brings new seed genetics to Canadian farms, empowering growers to thrive in ever-changing conditions. We are committed to helping farmers thrive with superior genetics, developing customer strategies to build best practices, all tailored to individual needs. Visit fpgenetics.ca to discover FP's dynamic portfolio of wheat, durum, barley, oats, peas, and rye, and to contact your local territory manager. FP Genetics. Gain a genetic advantage. Experience the next wave.
Farm smarter with SGS. Our expert seed testing ensures your crops start strong and thrive. From germination to vigor to disease testing, SGS delivers results you can trust. Plus, we've added new wheat midge refuge varieties perfect for seed growers. Need precision? Explore our seed testing packages with built-in savings. Call us today at 1-800-952-5407 or visit cropscience.sgs.ca. SGS, when you need to be sure.
If you're applying a low-rate N stabilizer, you might be falling for a losing strategy. Low-rate products promise great results, but may lack the potency of higher active ingredient concentrations, so great isn't always what you get. Don't put yield at risk. Put your trust in proven solutions. Anvol Nitrogen Stabilizer, Super U Premium Fertilizer, and Tribune Nitrogen Stabilizer from Koch Agronomic Services. These products offer higher active ingredient concentrations imitator brands can't match. See the difference at defendyourn.ca.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. Shaun Haney, Kelvin Heppner, Lyndsey Smith, Tyler McCann of Cappy. Tariffs, tariffs, tariffs. Here we go. We'll try to sort through this mess. Lyndsey describes it a mess during the commercial break. She may be putting it very lightly. Hey, delivering reliable agricultural lab testing for your crop, soil, feed, water, and seed. SGS is uniquely positioned, ready to elevate your business in both Canada and the United States. Call us now at 1-800-952-5407. That is SGS. Okay, let's talk about where we're at. And, remember, we're recording this midday on Friday. And I put out that caveat and that disclaimer because who knows where we are by 4 o'clock this afternoon or 6 o'clock tonight or tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. This thing just continues to change and to roll. Kelvin, as of right now, what is going on? Are there tariffs or not tariffs?
Oh, there are tariffs. Both Canada and the U.S. have tariffs on each other right now. That took effect this week as of March 4th. Yesterday, we saw President Trump announce that or sign an executive order that Canada and Mexico's imports into the U.S. Only the U.S. everything that wasn't USMCA compliant would still face the tariff, but everything under the USMCA agreements would be tariff-free until at least, or revert to the regular tariffs until April 2nd. The problem for Canada is, in the short term, 60-some%, it looks like, based on the math we're seeing, of our exports from Canada into the U.S. are not under the USMCA. There wasn't a reason to do it under the USMCA in the past because they were done under WTO or most favored nation status, most of these, I believe, and either the rate was lower or it was less paperwork to do it exported under that agreement than under the USMCA. So now there's a big question mark as to how much of Canada's exports to the U.S. can quickly be moved under the USMCA. Is it as simple as just checking a different box on that export permit on the paper? in the paperwork, or does there have to be a bunch of lawyers and accountants involved in terms of traceability and meeting country of origin, labeling country of origin requirements, rules of origin, all that type of red tape? On the Canadian side, the Canadian government implemented tariffs on about $30 billion Canadian worth of imports on at 12:01 on Tuesday, the same day the U.S. tariffs went into effect across the board. And so those tariffs are still in effect. Canada has another list of $125 billion worth that could face 25% tariffs. Originally, that would have been in late March. That's been kicked back to the April 2nd deadline now, according to Minister Dominic LeBlanc. So that second tranche is still in waiting and under consultation. So yeah, tariffs still on both sides. U.S. also, we should note, reduced the tariff on potash from Canada to 10%, matching the Canadian energy tariff at 10%, the reduced rate, not 25% as of yesterday. I don't know, Tyler and Lyndsey, feel free to add.
Tyler, if something is not USMCA compliant, like what is so does that mean, like Howard Lutnick made it sound like if it wasn't being pushed through under the terms of the USMCA, it was somehow being end-runned around, and that people were skirting the system. Are they skirting the system?
No, Shaun, and it is unfortunate how little it seems that these senior decision makers in the United States understand how trade works. Like it is. I think the word compliant kind of took on a new meaning yesterday when they were referred to it. But if the U.S. tariff outside of the trade agreement was already zero, and the trade agreement comes with rules of origin or extra paperwork, like there really is just no incentive to it. So it's not a question about doing an end run around it or not. Bakery goods are a good example where you get into this kind of, if you're making a banana bread, this is an example people like to use, and you can ship it across the United States with no tariff outside of USMCA. But under USMCA, you run into a rules of origin issue where your bananas in the banana bread mean the banana cannot qualify for the USMCA tariff. Then you can't. Is that an end run? No, because your MFN, the tariff that everybody else is paying is 0%. Again, it comes back to, I think, some really simple, basic realities, though. Like the US is out to inflict harm on Canada. Like that banana bread, if it was coming from China, maybe not China, if it was coming from Europe or Brazil or Indonesia, it would not be subject to a tariff. But the Americans are going out of their way to inflict that pain in Canada. And I think that there is something to be said for the Canadian approach, which is effectively, we don't want to negotiate with terrorists. And I think that we are in this world where this is economic terrorism that's going on. And I think that there's a lot of debate out there around whether or not Canada's taking the right approach or not. But I think it is. And I think it is important to highlight that as much as everyone trusts Donald Trump, he has effectively backed down twice with effectively no concessions from the Canadian side. So I really think that the U.S. listeners need to understand. They might think that Donald Trump's getting all of these big wins, but I don't think the evidence is there to back it up. I think all it is just pain and suffering all around for no gain.
Everybody. Pain and suffering for everybody.
For everybody.
Okay, so I said things could change. CNN is saying that a day after offering Canada a 1-month reprieve on punishing nearly across the board 25% tariffs, President Donald Trump has threatened new tariffs as soon as today, Friday, on Canadian lumber and dairy products. Canada's been ripping us off for years on lumber and dairy, Trump said in an Oval Office address on Friday, citing Canada's roughly 250% tariff on U.S. dairy exports to the country. Trump said America would match those tariffs dollar for dollar. And finally, he said, we may do it as early as today, or we'll wait until Monday or Tuesday. We're going to charge the same thing. It's not fair. It never has been fair. And they're treating our farmers badly. Probably lumber a little bit more worried about this than dairy, I'm going to say.
No, I don't
think so at all. No. So, and if I may, I'm going to back up a step. And actually, so even before you read that, Shaun, which I was going to tell you to close your mouth because I don't have any capacity left for more flip-flopping. However, I think what, further to Tyler's point, and this just sort of backs it up, is that ultimately, while there is a lot of bluster and a lot of threatening and some trust being broken, and this is all very large stuff, like I completely agree, the things that are starting to trickle out here are the same trade irritants that existed before and will continue to. Yes, this is of a magnitude and a size and a scope and scale we've never seen before. Don't get me wrong. But the reason that Trump, I think, went back on and said this USMCA thing, that takes care of the auto sector. The auto sector can get off his back. And the auto sector works well between Canada and the US and Mexico. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it works well. It was an easy way to say, you guys, here, I'll say fine. Make it US. You guys are all USMCA compliant. We're done. I listened to when he was signing executive orders yesterday as well. We should totally be doing stories that he made March Irish Immigration Month. Anyway, those are the kind of executive orders which I'm like, it's St. Paddy's Day, isn't it already? But he brought up dairy and lumber, and he harped on those and singled out Canada as being unfair to the U.S. on it. So these are the same trade irritants that were part of renegotiating the USMCA. They are still going to be the trade irritants, and realistically, they're still in the U.S.'s sights. This isn't actually new. It's the same trade irritants.
And effectively all of our dairy exports are USMCA compliant. So we do export. The U.S. Americans imported $300 million U.S. of Canadian kind of dairy, poultry products, all through USMCA. So again, you get into this debate: is Trump breaking his own deal if he puts that tariff in place inside the USMCA agreement, the one he negotiated, the one he said is the best one ever? Then he's. I don't know if we need another example of him breaking commitments that the Americans have long made and held, commitments he himself negotiated, but this would be another one.
Well, but this is getting to our earlier conversation about is the American farmer on side with some of the things that are happening. This is one where the American farmer is very much on side with. The U.S. side, right or wrong, I'm not making their case. I'm telling you what the U.S. dairy industry continues to tell me in conversations is that the push here is meet the U.S. definition of the TRQ allocation. Right. We know that you won the 2 dispute panels. They feel that Canada knew what the definition was in the agreement, and that's what they're pushing for. Now, what I'm interested in is, do they go further than that, which would be different than what they've been talking to me about since going back to November.
But if he puts a 250% tariff on Canadian products that are within the agreement, then Canada should take away all of the access U.S. dairy has to the Canadian market. We should match that tariff for tariff. So the quotas that exist where U.S. farmers get duty-free access to the Canadian market should be taken off the table, and we should, again, go tit for tat. If Trump wants to take tariff-free access away, then we should too. And then those U.S. dairy farmers that are maybe worried about a little bit of Canadian dairy coming across the border will lose access to a lot more of their dairy products that are coming north, and they can decide whether or not Trump's done a good thing for them or not.
Well, and I'm going to ask the question, what a lot of the audience that is outside of dairy is probably saying to themselves right now, Tyler McCann, is we're going to drive this relationship worse all again for Canadian dairy.
No, let's be really clear on something. We are not making any of this worse. Donald Trump and the U.S. administration continue to move first. They are the ones that make this worse. They are the ones that are escalating it. Again, I just reject the premise that the Canadian approach should be to roll over and do nothing. I just think that that's not acceptable.
Well, and I also, and Kelvin, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to take over hosting, apparently, Shaun. I apologize. But one of the key things here that I think gets missed in a lot of these conversations, because we're trying to make it simple and it's not. We're trying to make sound bites and you can't. But this is one of the things like this: what's USMCA compliant, what's not? Is it a workaround if you're not using it? No. Same thing with, we have trade agreements with the US that allows for certain amounts of things to come in tariff free or at zero, and then above that, yes, it is tariffed, but you don't get a chance to even have that conversation. So, Kelvin, you've been navigating some of this week as well, trying to get people to recognize that this isn't as simple as just what goes across the border today or tomorrow.
Yeah, there's a lot of misinformation floating around, especially on social media. There's this list of things that Canada supposedly has tariffs on, and the numbers are exorbitantly high, and it's again an overly simplistic, not accurate list, and it's circulating on all the social media platforms. So that, I think, is what you're referring to, Lyndsey, and people are sharing that and saying this is why US is fully within its rights to put tariffs on Canada, but Canada doesn't actually have those tariffs listed on that list that is being shared all over social media. Not accurate. And what Tyler alluded to, there's the tariff rate quota where we import a certain volume at zero or much lower tariff rate. And so just that list is overly simplistic, not accurate. And if you're sharing it, please stop, because it's not helping. It's not helping.
I think the problem here is that sure, Canada can say, hey, US dairy don't need you, and we can pretend we're like living in this little dairy vacuum. But the reality is that all this leads to, if not de-escalated, is to a broader and broader list. Because if I'm the US, then I'm saying, no thank you, live cattle. Or no thank you, Canadian canola. Canadian canola might be the easier one than live cattle. And then it's we got to do something else. That's the problem here.
Done that. That's what's happened.
No, I know.
That is.
But
this week.
But a shutting off of product is long term is a major catastrophe economically for the Canadian agricultural landscape. And I'm not saying roll over. I'm just saying, like, there are major consequences to and potential impacts here on the path that this goes if somehow we don't negotiate our way out of it in some fashion.
Shaun, we should never move first. We should not shut off that tap. We should not alienate the United States. But that does not mean we don't, when they go first, when they put a 250% tariff on, that we do not respond with a 250% tariff in return.
So is Canada Canada and Mexico you know what? I'm going to ask that question when we come back. We got to take a very quick break, because that may spur on a whole bunch of other commentary out of you. Okay, calling all Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, and northern Minnesota growers. The new seed omega-3 canola production system can help you unlock a guaranteed path to market with attractive premium opportunities, first-in-class agronomy support, and free on-farm pickup after harvest. To learn more, go to omega3canola.com. We're right back on RealAg Radio right after this. Looking for proven performance in wheat? Lima Grain Cereal Seeds has you covered. With locally adaptive varieties bred across key growing regions, LCS delivers top-tier genetics for winter and spring wheat. In 2024, LCS farmers swept 12 national wheat yield contest categories and won the Bin Buster Award for the 4th straight year. Learn more by going to limagraincerealseeds.com.
If you grow soy or edible beans in Ontario, you know that Sclerotinia white mold is no joke. Yield loss can be devastating, and timing fungicides can be complicated, but did you know there's a new seed treatment that can help mitigate yield loss? Start the year off with your best foot forward against disease. Ask your seed supplier or local Agrimart group to pre-treat your beans with Heads Up. Part of a complete white mold management plan, ask your seed dealer about Heads Up today or visit headsupst.com.
Fun show so far. We got Kelvin Heppner, Lyndsey Smith, Tyler McCann of Cappy. Thanks a lot for joining us here, everybody. We really do appreciate it. Hey, get ahead of hard-to-kill weeds. I hate hard-to-kill weeds, and I know you do too. You can do that with pre-emergent soil-active herbicides, Valterra EZ and Fierce EZ from New Farm. Apply after spring thaw for up to 8 weeks of extended weed control this spring. Find out more about New Farm products at newfarm.ca. Okay, the question I was going to ask before we headed to the break is, now, both got the same outcomes for the most part on Thursday, Canada and Mexico, but they're going about it differently. So would we say then, Tyler, that actually, Lyndsey, I'll ask you first. Would you say that Canada is doing a better job than Mexico negotiating these tariffs? And why is it different?
Question. So things are different for a couple different reasons. For one, I think let's use we're predicating all of this on fentanyl crossing the border and illegal immigrant movement, right? Because we're supposed to pretend that that's what this is about. So if that's what we're doing, Mexico comes from a much better place of negotiating because they have more improvement. They have more to actually solve, right? So you have more impact with everything you decide to do, right? The Canadian impact for everything we decide to do, really, I mean, yes, we have made gains. We have announced things. We have invested money towards what we are supposed to be focused on, apparently, this red herring. But realistically, the gap just isn't as large to cross. So there's that. The second part, though, is that it's somewhat unfair because realistically, I don't feel like I'm seeing a lot of the Mexican side of this thing because we're Canadian and we're getting a lot of the Canadian media and the US media and that back and forth. I'm not seeing a lot of what happens in Mexico or in Mexican media. So that's somewhat unfair. I think that ultimately it comes down to, I think that Canada has more of what the US wants. And so we are the target more so than Mexico. Mexico has to clean up their act and has an easier job doing it as far as making promises. That's my assessment.
As is sometimes the case, Shaun, I disagree a little bit with Lyndsey because I think she's giving the Americans too much credit. And I think there is this kind of personality thing where Donald Trump doesn't like Justin Trudeau, and that may explain a lot of it. And again, it is bonkers in my mind that that's actually what's driving it, but it seems like it could be playing a role.
I disagree with you. I think we make way too big of a deal, but continue.
But I think what we should be talking about is the fact that over the last couple of weeks, what we've seen is, regardless of the strategy that you take, Donald Trump backs down. And I think it's less about kind of which one is winning the most and more about who's losing. And again, I think what I see is, at least in the short term, there's a separate long-term issue come to in a minute, but in the short term, again, Donald Trump is not winning anything. And I think that we need to help understand that. And I hope that American listeners think through this and understand that nothing has changed. There's been pain and suffering on both sides, and nothing's changed. So I think it's less about is Mexico doing it better or Canada do it better, or just recognizing that it's the U.S. that's doing it worse on both fronts. The problem is, long term, this has a different impact. And actually, the threat and uncertainty and the impact on the investment climate in Canada does do long-term pain. And I think it is already having an impact where businesses are looking at other plans. And so he may win in the long term with these threats of tariffs hanging over us. I think there's a good argument to be made actually of, no, the best thing is bring the tariffs in, let U.S. consumers deal with the inflation, let U.S. consumers deal with the higher prices, let U.S. businesses react really negatively, and then the tariffs will come across. We're almost in the worst of all of the outcomes today, where it's the threat and the uncertainty that's hanging over us all.
I agree. And I heard that at Commodity Classic on the floor. When you talk to manufacturers, people in the ag chem space, seed companies, like not all, but a high majority agree with that. I would rather have the tariffs in place, know what I'm dealing with. I can make plans. Just imagine right now being in the procurement department of somebody trying to buy sugar for Nabisco, or somebody trying to buy Canadian oats and trying to sort that out. Should I front load? Should I back load? What I had a contract. Now what? That's the uncertainty that's being created. That what I do not believe is getting enough attention is, I know it's creating angst in the Canadian market. It's definitely also creating angst in the Mexican market. What is not getting enough coverage is the angst and indecision and stress it is creating in the U.S. domestic business environment on how to steer all through this. And I think the administration continues to think as if American companies just sort of deal in America. Well, they also they have a lot of customers and procurement decisions that are cross-border. And I think all three countries are kind of in that same economic boat. And what we have is a test of resilience, a test of resolve. Who has the resolve to get through this period of time? And if there are Canadian businesses, let's be honest, there are Canadian business. I heard this week, there are Canadian businesses that are in the process, not thinking, in the process of relocating. So that is a real thing.
Yeah, I got an email.
Did you? There you go. See, so that is real, and that is a long-term threat. But there's also a test of resolve in the U.S. If we start to see inflation go up, does the American consumer have the resolve to stick with the strategy? That also has to play itself out because I don't how high of inflation and how long of a time period. So it presents a whole bunch of interesting questions. Kelvin, go ahead.
Not only the tariffs that are inflationary, but that uncertainty is inflationary. Because if you're working in procurement at Nabisco or General Mills or at Smithfield, you're going because of you want to take that risk off the table because of this whiplash effect of different tariffs and different trade scenarios every day. Instead, let's just offer 10% higher and lock in a bunch of contracts. Let's offer 10% higher price and just take that uncertainty off the table. Well, that 10% higher gets built into the price that is passed on the rest of the value chain right down to consumers. And so that uncertainty itself adds cost that ultimately is borne by American voters.
Lyndsey, how did he get to be so smart? That was a great point.
You know what? Hanging out with us, I think.
Is that what it is? That was a great point. I love that.
Okay. Yeah.
I just want to move on. I want to get out of tariff land. Okay, go ahead.
I just want to add one thing that I think is being missed in all of this, and that is Canada is great. The U.S. is great. I'm sure there's people in Mexico who thinks Mexico is great. There's nothing wrong with the U.S. wanting to do more manufacturing. Like, can I make that abundantly clear? I don't think anyone in Canada is like, why are you being so dumb? No, that's a great idea. Yeah. But the way this administration is going about it is absolutely bonkers. And exactly that is inflationary and costs everybody more money, including Americans. So, like, I want to be very clear here. This isn't about, that we don't think the U.S. should be able to grow its business. Go, fill your boots, guys. That's awesome. I wish we did more of that.
No, you're right.
It's the way, exactly, right? It's the way this administration is going about it that is just bonkers to me.
And here's the thing. So you heard me ranting and raving about this idea we shouldn't talk about integrated supply chains. Had a meeting this week where somebody gave me a better word. Okay? Complementary. And I think that is a great way to phrase it. And so your point there, Lyndsey, is North America needs to suck manufacturing somehow, some way, not in T-shirts and TVs, probably like Howard Lutnick was talking yesterday, but in some of the things that we're doing, we have an opportunity to suck back some of that manufacturing from places like China and bring it to North America, where there are three countries that can really work together in a complementary manner and really lead to economic excellence. But the problem is that we really need the U.S. to see Canada and Mexico as strategic partners in that, instead of such North American competitors like we are currently the spell that we're currently under. Okay, we got to take a very quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Lawrence MacAulay. He's winding it up. He's not going to be rerunning. What does that mean for his legacy, and what is that legacy? We'll talk about it when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Co-op knows your community because we live here too. Our teams are your trusted partners with a range of expertise to help support your entire farm operation. And we're giving back. In the past 5 years, Co-op has invested over $1.1 billion in the prairies through building, upgrading, and expanding local facilities. And we've returned over $1.17 billion to Co-op members in the prairies. Co-op, we're all building something for the future. Here for your farm, here for your family. Learn more at coop.crs/farm.
Every farmer defines success differently, and every farm has its own unique challenges. Corteva Biologicals is partnering with Canadian farmers for their success, offering unique solutions that improve and protect crops from start to finish, based on each field's needs. Using proven, predictable solutions across all crop stages, Corteva Biologicals helps build healthy, productive, and profitable farms. Corteva Biologicals, we're growing together. Hey, welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. FP Genetics brings new seed genetics to Canadian farms, empowering growers to thrive in ever-changing conditions. Visit fpgenetics.ca to discover FP's dynamic portfolio of seed and to contact your local territory manager. Gain a genetic advantage and experience the next wave with FP Genetics. Shaun Haney, Lyndsey Smith, Kelvin Heppner, Tyler McCann, and I want to talk about Lawrence MacAulay. He has been in the House of Commons for, 35 years, Kelvin? Is that correct?
36 plus, 1988.
Yeah, good year, 1988. I was a lot younger then. He was too. I guess I'd done a reel where I was asking, what's his legacy? And it's interesting. There was a lot of people that said, I really liked him, nice man, but I didn't get a lot in terms of like policy impact that they could stamp on him, at least in the responses. What comes to mind for you, Kelvin?
I think that is a fair assessment. There isn't a lot of heavy lift policy change that Minister MacAulay implemented. He certainly was more of a messenger from the Trudeau government to the agriculture community than necessarily a strong vocal advocate for certain causes in cabinet. The USMCA renegotiation and his relationship with Sonny Perdue, the U.S. Ag Secretary at the time, is something that comes to mind, where he was quite effective there. They established a personal friendship that saw Sonny and his wife visit Lawrence and his wife Frances at their farm in the Maritimes or in Atlantic Canada. And so that is one moment that stands out. But certainly, I think MacAulay was also a good local riding politician. He certainly never forgot where he came from and never forgot if somebody was celebrating a significant birthday or milestone anniversary, that kind of thing. And longevity, certainly representing PEI for that many years, is part of his legacy. But in terms of major policy moves, like Jerry Ritz, for example, ending the Canadian Wheat Board or things like that, I'm not sure that MacAulay has anything attached to his name.
I interviewed him on the Tuesday. I interviewed him on the Tuesday of the week where he made the announcement on the Saturday. I wish he would have done it on the show here. That would have been great. Tyler, go ahead.
Yeah, so I wanted to take over hosting duties and ask Kelvin a follow-up question. Now this time, Kelvin, he said that there were kind of no major policy announcements that come to mind. What about minor policy announcements that come to mind?
Yeah, there was like the sustainable ag strategy, which is kind of dead in the water now. There was, and some of that was Marie-Claude Bibeau's initiative. We did see Bill C-49 during MacAulay's first stint as ag minister.
The transport bill?
Yeah, the transport bill. Which
did he get that done?
Okay. UPOV 91.
UPOV 91 was Jerry Ritz.
That was Jerry Ritz.
Okay.
Keep trying, Shaun. Keep trying.
Yeah, again, exactly. He's someone that obviously cared about the sector, but he himself has said that he's not vocal in cabinet meetings publicly. It really is hard to understand it. I think it's a really good lesson for the sector to understand that while we always want to have a farmer as ag minister, I think, Lyndsey, you've done some stories about this over the years, right? Whether or not we should have a farmer or not. I think what's a lot more important is someone that's engaged and motivated at the end of the day. A good ag minister does not need to be a farmer. A good ag minister does not need to have SHIT on their boots. A good ag minister needs to want to make a difference. And, it's hard to see kind of what difference MacAulay made.
Well, and also maybe, to be fair to him, a victim of how maybe agriculture hasn't been that important to the Liberal Party. Was there a path for him to do so?
Bibeau made a difference. A lot of people that are listening may not have agreed with the difference that Bibeau tried to make, but she showed that you can make a difference if you want to.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, the sustainable ag strategy that I mentioned was actually Bibeau's initiative too, and some of the environmental...
Yeah, the significant environmental funding, more than $1 billion announced that way. I doubt Bibeau would have let the SAS, the sustainable ag strategy, die the way that MacAulay has. Again,
so maybe it is his relationship with Secretary Perdue then, which is a pretty significant. That's not a policy, but I think at the time we looked upon those double dates and going for ice cream as a positive in those negotiations.
But again, is that MacAulay that had the impact, or is that Perdue being close to the U.S. ag industry and hearing from the U.S. ag industry how important the Canada-U.S. relationship is that made a difference at the end of the day?
I don't know.
Call Sonny and ask. That's
love.
Can we do that?
We'd love to have Secretary Perdue on the show.
And then, Shaun, how do you contrast that good relationship with the first ag secretary to no relationship with this ag secretary at the end of the day, and how do you weigh that out? Because
different personalities. She's they would not seem very compatible.
Well, and also let's remember we have this sort of like from the U.S. perspective, so far as I can guess, not to drag us back into this, but like they sort of view the Canadian government right now as, I mean, it is prorogued, and we're about to have an election at some point. There is this sort of non-permanency to it as well. I could see where someone might sort of just brush off, like, you're probably not going to be ag minister, and now we know he won't be ag minister for much longer. So yeah, but there has been news while we were on the air that we should probably talk
now
about.
What? 100% tariffs? What's going on?
No, this is a Canadian announcement.
They figured out how they're not going to have that SpaceX shuttle blow up, and they've figured that out either.
We cannot solve that problem. Kelvin, do you have the details in front of you?
Because I'm just going to keep on guessing.
Okay.
My Elon internet here might be struggling here too at the same time between this SpaceX incident this morning or it's last day here. Yeah.
No, I mean,
federal government has announced a bunch of support measures here for helping workers and businesses, and it includes a $1 billion contribution to Farm Credit Canada in new financing to help Canadian agriculture with the financial barriers.
Okay,
Hey, Tyler?
Reaction.
The reaction is that like this is really, I think it speaks to Lawrence MacAulay's time as agriculture minister. I think it speaks to how the government sees agriculture, that, again, we're effectively 2 months into this tariff situation, and the best support that they can come up with is extra money for Farm Credit Canada. Farm Credit Canada doesn't need the money. If you need financing from Farm Credit Canada, they will give you financing. This is, to be honest, I think it's pretty disappointing. I mean, it passes my bar, which has become somebody needs to do something. So I guess they've done something.
There you go, Tyler.
And they should be applauded for doing something, but haven't. I mean, Kathy put out a list 3 weeks ago of short, medium, long-term actions. And it's not rocket science. We have a pretty good idea of what we can do. Some of those actions were, they should create a working group with food processors to understand the issues that are there. And Macaulay's had a couple of ad hoc roundtables. The department is doing kind of things a little bit willy-nilly all over the place. They can't even get themselves together to get a working group formed.
Right.
But it's something. So congratulations. The government of Canada has done something for Canadian farmers in the context of tariffs.
Well, FPT group, that I haven't followed up here today, but as of Wednesday, they still hadn't met. They're still trying to get together. There's lack of urgency.
I mean, they did meet a week after the tariffs were supposed to come in the first time. So, again, that's better than the bar of doing something. I think that there's what this should do, and I had some discussions, Shaun, when we were in Edmonton with people. We have farmers and farm organizations and industry associations that have not been vocal calling for anything. And I hear people say, we're having discussions behind the scenes. But those discussions behind the scenes seem to be having no impact at all. And so I sometimes have been critical of farm groups, but this is the time when we need them, and this is the time when we need them to step up, and this is the time when we need them to say, we need government to take these issues seriously, and we need government to be acting.
Well, the government's saving their dollars for when they got to bail out the auto sector, potentially. We'll see.
Tyler, do you know offhand what FCC's lending? I think it's around 10, 11, 12 billion that's how much they would borrow out before this announcement.
So I don't know those numbers offhand, but what I do know is the last time, so in 2021, during COVID, the government gave FCC, I think, $1 billion again in extra financing. And FCC paid that money back the year after in $500 million one year and $500 million the next year, or whatever the numbers were. So it didn't have an impact on FCC's lending. I think that this is kind of the easy thing for them to go to is offer FCC more liquidity.
Yeah.
But
okay, well, hey, we're out of time. We got to stop. We got to quit. Tyler, thanks for joining us. You did it on very short notice today. Greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Shaun. Again, this is a great time to be in ag policy, but would be nice if it was a little less crazy.
I'm slightly exhausted. Kelvin, have yourself a great weekend.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Lyndsey, all the best to you.
You as well.
Okay. If you have any feedback on today's show, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com, or call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. Chat again next week. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you for downloading this RealAg Radio podcast brought to you by Focus Herbicide from FMC. Lentil and wheat growers get a clean start this spring with Focus Herbicide. Along with early burn-off and extended weed control, Focus Herbicide provides excellent resistance management. See your local retailer or visit ag.fmc.com/CA today.